Hello, I'm State Representative Ron Amstutz from Wayne County, which is House District 1. Welcome to Ohio in Focus.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Ohio in Focus, a program that brings state government to you. I'm your host, Mike Ditto, and today we have with us State Representative Ron Amstutz, who serves Ohio's 1st House District, which includes all of Wayne County. Representative, thanks for joining us this morning.
It's good to be with you.
So you are either blessed or cursed to have been the chairman of the House Finance and Appropriations Committee since January of 2011. We've gone through a difficult budget cycle in the last General Assembly and what some might call an easier one this General Assembly. Can you tell us a little bit about where we are with the budget and how the two situations differ since you've been chairman?
Sure, thank you. And it is a blessing and an opportunity to try to help our state be stronger just through the challenges that are assigned to me as the chairman of this particular committee. It's a large committee, almost the size of the Ohio Senate. We were faced with a very difficult situation a couple of budgets ago, and that situation involved first a deep decline in the state's tax revenues and some increase in costs, and a structural deficit had opened up which had not been resolved, and the result was going to be catastrophic if we didn't resolve that. But through the leadership of the governor and the strong participation of both the House and Senate, we were able to right that budget ship to get the budget spending in line with our revenue, and that was critical. We were faced with a very serious well, basically, we were running on borrowed money, which you really can't do. Our Constitution prohibits that.
That's right.
And so, for operating purposes. So we had to overcome that, and now we've seen a recovery come of our revenues, and not only a recovery that has brought us the ability to start to recharge the key programs that we fund, which are basically education and healthcare for those who don't have resources, but we were able to institute some tax reductions to further help amplify the recovery of our economy.
When you take a look at the budget from the last General Assembly, we've heard you and the Speaker and others in the House Majority Caucus talk about how those difficult decisions made in the last General Assembly led to the far easier decisions that were made in this last budget. Do you think that's still true today?
I do. We have to exercise discipline and plan in ways that don't have too short-sighted a viewpoint. And I think we've been able to do that and be participative in that process. And that does pay dividends. It creates some level of certainty for the programs that we fund. And that's very important to them being effective. You can't be bouncing up and down like sometimes has happened in the past with funding. That always creates poor program delivery for the folks that are either being educated or receiving health care.
You talked about some of the tax changes that occurred in this last budget. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit on those and talk about what that means for everyday Ohioans.
Well, yes, thank you. We are, I think, being helped by some tax changes that were made 10 years ago and phased in, where we repealed several taxes and lowered the state income tax somewhat. We have a real problem in Ohio with our state income tax. It is non-competitive relative to other states, particularly when you consider our local partners at the municipal level that also have income taxes. That's unusual across other states. So that's a problem, and we had the problem of the estate tax driving many Ohioans out of the state. So both those two taxes have been a real problem. We repealed in the last budget the estate tax.
Right.
So that's one thing that is starting to help. But the other thing is the state income tax, and in this budget that we just passed and are rolling out now, and as people have just filed their state income tax returns, we have lowered the state income tax rates, all the brackets, by 8.5%, and that is going to continue to click down a little further. And we're now at work at looking if we can go deeper than that and still maintain the core services that we try to fund.
There was wide discussion several years ago about the fact that there was only 89 cents in the so-called rainy day fund or the budget stabilization fund. Now the amount in there is nearly $1.5 billion. Can you tell folks back home what the rainy day fund is, how it works, and what it means to have money in there now?
It's an indicator, and it's a mechanism that we use to stabilize. In fact, it's called the Budget Stabilization Fund. The nickname is the Rainy Day Fund. And its purpose is to stabilize our revenue flow when we do get into bumpy economic times, and those things happen. So it's a protection, frankly, against tax increases as much as possible. It gives us something to draw from. It's a reserve that when in order to keep our programs from becoming damaged. When you start and stop programs, as I said, that's not a good thing. Typically, unless the program isn't working, that's different. But our baseline school funding, higher education funding, and our Medicaid program for children and older folks that don't have resources, that is something that you don't want to be turning on and off. You have to, and so the Budget Stabilization Fund is our measure that we use, and that got drained in tough times. I thought too quickly, and created part of that structural deficit. So the fact that we've been able to recharge that, and $1.5 billion sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but in the context of a over $30 billion tax operating fund, it isn't. It's a month of our operating.
A small percentage.
But it does help if you can meter that out when you need to, and have that in reserve to protect us from tax increases.
Transitioning a little bit into what's happening now in 2014, just a few months ago, the governor introduced his mid-biennium review, otherwise known as the MBR. Could you tell us what the MBR is and what the House did with the governor's proposal?
Sure. We have a very strong leader in the governor, and that's a good thing. He has come forward. I call him, I sometimes say, well, we're getting 90-mile, 100-mile-an-hour pitches here, and the General Assembly can get some hits when we have those proposals coming in. And that's kind of how we took this proposal again. It's kind of a budget adjustment. There were not any real big changes in the budget itself proposed. It was fairly small dollar amounts. We weren't redoing the whole budget, although some people thought we were. But, But there were a lot of policy adjustments that were being made across a range of things that we can talk a little more about here. And we decided that those policy proposals really deserved careful review. And so we broke them up into actually 14 different bills that have been under consideration, and in 11 different committees. So we've been working and are producing, I think, a good product. We can't get everything done probably that's been proposed. Some of it will be our future agenda that we need to come and work on. But we've been able to take a lot of significant actions that I think will be helpful in adjusting and more efficiently operating, especially down at the local level. Really, most of what is delivered is not state service. It's the state helping as a partner to fund our local communities in their programs, and that's what we're talking about here.
Do you believe that breaking up the MBR into several different components throughout many different committees allowed not only the members but constituents across the state more of an opportunity to provide some comment on each of those proposals?
No question. It has helped the process, and our House is very interested in having good process so that there's adequate opportunity for participation from our local folks that we represent, and frankly the experts in these fields that are able to help us understand more deeply what it is that we're trying to set policy for.
One of those MBR proposals that was broken up and was heard in your committee, and I believe you carried the bill, was House Bill 483, which provided numerous amounts of changes to state law and some appropriation changes as well. But it also focused on some items that this General Assembly has focused on since last year, dealing with opiate abuse and opioid addiction. I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about House Bill 483 in the sense of the drug addiction side of it, but also what else was in that bill.
Well, thank you. That bill was sort of the the centerpiece
The standard
of all
bearer.
the work that we
Sure.
were doing. And we ended up, because we wanted to emphasize some of the policies that we're doing in the opioid addiction area, and that's things like prescription drugs that are opiates, or like OxyContin would be an example, or illegal drugs like heroin.
Right.
Those are opiates too. We wanted to emphasize that, so we actually had a number of bills that we've passed over to the Senate, as well as incorporating some of the same language into the big budget bill, because that bill will get finished, and we wanted to emphasize the importance of getting these policies in place as soon as possible. So, and what we're trying to do there is, again, we're not trying to take over with some kind of new state program. It's not really a governmental thing as much as it is us partnering with our local communities to try to address this at the community level, even the neighborhood and family level. That's where the fight is.
Do you believe that something like House Bill 483 or some of the other MBR proposals will receive quick action in the Senate, or are the negotiations ongoing for those bills now that many of them are over in the other chamber?
Well, we have a good working relationship with the Senate, and of course these also involve the administration, which we'll be helping to implement.
Certainly.
So I believe that we're going to see a wide range of actions that are clicking into gear as the year goes forward here. Some of them become effective immediately on passage because they're appropriation type programs. Others will have a little bit of a delay as the administration is set up and there's a 90-day process. And other things, frankly, we're not going to get finished with, and we're going to have to come back to them late in the year and even next session. And that's okay. You can't do everything at once and do it right.
Another bill that passed out at around that same time was House Bill 484, one of the MBR proposals, this one dealing with higher education. And one of the items in that bill, and I want to make sure I get this right, was the creation of the Higher Education Student Financial Aid Work Group. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on 484 and what this means for the state higher education institutions across Ohio.
Well, it's an example, frankly, of this whole all-hands-on-deck approach that we're trying to amplify and use as a policy focus. We feel that there are some real opportunities that we need to focus on for our students to get through their education without being overloaded with long-term debt that might actually be a barrier to their being successful in their life walk. And I think that's going to be the focus of that group, and we hope that by bringing them into gear, they will help us identify some maybe more efficient and less costly ways to achieve their educational goals.
One of the items that the House has really dealt with and looked at over the last 15 or so months has been the state's Medicaid program. We have in Senate Bill 206 as well as House Bill 485 some new guidelines for the state Medicaid program, and something that you've worked on, the Healthier Buckeye proposal. What is that proposal, and what are you seeing as far as upcoming changes to the state's Medicaid program?
Thank you. That is a very large subject, but let me just share a couple of things. The Medicaid program is actually a multitude of programs that are health care delivery for a range of situations, and it has, over the past several decades, threatened to eat alive the rest of the budget, which is mostly education. So these two competing things are very concerning, and it's critical service we're talking about here. Some of these folks are very disabled. But in other cases, there are individuals who are being held back and are needing public assistance because of a series of situations, maybe gaps in their education, or maybe they have some addiction problems or mental health problems, or perhaps there's barriers that are keeping them from moving to a better place. And the idea of the Healthier Buckeye program isn't to create it's really not a new program. It's really an effort by the state to encourage our local communities to more effectively organize themselves for one purpose, and that is to help individuals and families move themselves up and off of needing public assistance. So it's the other side of the Medicaid equation. If we can graduate more people from needing public assistance, our state will be stronger. we'll be able to invest more in education and thus create a better environment for everybody. That's the broad goal.
Well, you've talked a lot about, not just during this program, but throughout your tenure as a legislator, about the opportunity for members of the legislature to be able to lift people up and out onto their own and to be able to take care of themselves to some degree. Do you think at this point that the House has been able to accomplish a lot of what you've set out as a goal?
Actually not. I think we have a lot of work ahead of us yet. I think we've just started a little bit of a groove here, and frankly the governor has been leading in this very strongly. His State of the State this time had, this year was more than a dozen examples of programs that now we've seen many of them in this mid-biennial budget review process that we're running forward that are all designed to reach out to help veterans that are having struggles or folks that are addicted or folks that are finding themselves in prison because they maybe have some kind of addiction problem or a mental health problem and they did things that are illegal that hurt other people. And so now we have to help them with a path back to a healthier life. And others that are threatening to drop down into that. Maybe they've dropped out of school and have got a, they're, in their 20s now, but they still haven't reached their potential at all.
Right.
And so what can we do to bring all hands on deck? And I'm not talking about a government program here particularly, although government's a partner. We're more the convener, the catalyst to help those mentors that maybe have already been through the same problem and now have some passion to help those that are still struggling, and to bring the lean, efficient, mission-driven folks into gear here. And they're out there already. We just need to help them.
Looking ahead here, there's about 8 months left in this General Assembly. The Speaker has talked about the need for possible additional study committees perhaps over the summer and other legislative action that will certainly take place in the next few months, but also later on this year. What do you see as some of the major agenda items looking forward to the rest of 2014 beyond what we've talked about today?
Well, I frankly think we've already talked about the things that will be our agenda. They are incomplete work. We need to continue to look at how to strengthen and make more effective our education system. And that's not driving it from Columbus, but it's us helping to clarify that. It involves that lifting up component that we need in all of our communities to be healthy and active for our people. And it involves further improvements to our tax code so that we aren't holding back our economy more than it should be. It means a whole range of things like that, being partners with our communities basically. Whether not just government, but that's obviously what we do, but with our private sector folks that really make it possible for government to provide services because they are the heartbeat of our economy. It's manufacturing, and so we're going to be reconnecting with those through our task forces, through our. This is a year where we are reconnecting and laying the agenda for next year. That's typically it's a 2-year cycle.
That's right.
Next year we'll be busy at the next phase of legislative action. This year, we're just wrapping up some things and working really hard to understand how to set up our agenda for next year. That's kind of what the election process is about.
One of the items that we only have about a minute left to cover, but I want to make sure we get an opportunity to cover, that you worked on very heavily was the capital budget. Can you tell us what the capital budget entailed? And obviously this is one type of budget that hasn't been, has not been seen much by folks around Capitol Square in the last few years. So what does this mean for Ohio?
Well, thank you. We've been talking up to now about the operating budget programs. The capital improvement budget is more like, okay, we're going to build a house instead of have a monthly budget. And you're right, during lean times, we pulled back on our capital improvement programs to a bare minimum in order to conserve the debt service you have to pay back our capital improvement program. So this is an indication of being stronger now. We have a full capital improvement bill that is going to protect our assets that the state taxpayers own and also provide some help to our communities over the next several years. So that's what that budget's about.
So there's a lot coming down the pike here in the next few months, and I'm hopeful that as time permits, you'll be able to join us and tell us about what the ultimate result was of the MBR proposals and any other items that you'd like to talk about when we reconvene next time, if you'll be willing to do that.
Look forward to that. Thank you.
Very good. Chairman, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Glad to have Representative Ron Amstutz of the 1st House District with us today, and we look forward to seeing each of you once again next time on the next edition of Ohio in Focus, the program that brings state government to you. Thanks once again for joining us.